Good morning. I'm Desiree Dubois, founder of Homework. And Homework is where you can live where you work where you live, anywhere in the world. And every Wednesday morning, we meet with our women business professionals and entrepreneurs, and they share their best programs, projects, and processes. So today, I have the pleasure of being introducing you to Christina Suter, who is now ChristinaSuter.com. I've known her for I've known her for a couple of years, but she is has a wealth of experience and knowledge in real estate and real estate investment specifically. So, Christina, welcome. Take it away. Tell them all the wonderful things you've been doing.
All right. So let me do my version of an elevator pitch. So I've been investing for 35 years. I started when I was 17 years old. My mother was in bad health. We lived in the San Gabriel Valley. This is for Andrea. She lived in the San Gabriel Valley and she was allergic to smog. So she had to move. And because she had to move up to Northern California where she could breathe, she asked us three kids who wants to take over the house. And my sister and brother went, I don't know what to do with it. And I went, I'll do it. I'll do it. So I took over her house. Literally, she titled it over to me, furniture and all, and like got herself out of there to Northern California. And I rented it out to my aunt and uncle who bought it from me on an installment sale. Of course, knew nothing about renting. I knew nothing about installment sales. And then my brother had a condo. He's like, I don't know what to do with this condo. It's not working for me. I went, I'll buy it. I'll buy it. And so I, gave him a little bit of down payment and got a loan on it. And I rented it out Section 8 for like, I don't know, 8 years successfully to this lady who had two kids and, always paid. And I didn't have any trouble. And I just kind of started acquiring real estate. But to be accurate about my experience, is all really based on some version of residential. So I've owned single families, fourplexes, multi-units inside the state of California, outside of the state of California. I've owned condo-tels, don't suggest condo-tels. Based on that experience, I've invested in many different syndicated deals over time. I do hard money lending to flippers, as well as people who have second homes, like investment homes. I do notes on those as well. Let's see, I've been a flipper. I've done a condo conversion, lot split. I've never done ground up development. So that's probably the one thing I've not done in residential, but I've approached it from a lot of different directions, all based upon the asset I know well, renting out a unit to a human being that needs a home. That's what I understand. That's what I primarily work in.
That's enough. And that's enough. Absolutely.
And it's enough. It's enough in that over 35 years, I've come at it from so many different ways. So, I do stocks. So I do have other investments. I have invested in oil. Didn't go well, but I have invested in oil. And so I really perceive myself more as an investor versus just a real estate person. Although my favorite investment for a lot of reasons is real estate. A lot of it having to do with control. Maybe I'm a little bit of a control freak, but I can't control stocks. Coca-Cola doesn't care what my opinion is, but my renters do and my property managers do. And so maybe I just like having people listen to me. But I do feel like I have more control over my rental properties and my real estate assets. And I've done short-term rentals as well. That's newer for me. So yeah, you get a sense for I have a diversified portfolio and diversified background.
Well, the thing is that I think it's fabulous. And one of the exciting things about real estate is the fact that you can enter it from so many different areas, whether it's the fix and flips, whether it's the long-term holds or short-term hold rentals or, the buying and selling, or as you do, the hard money lending. There's so many aspects and so many different facets of real estate that one, you can't get bored. And secondly, if you don't like one, you can also still navigate through other areas or other points of areas to be able to find a success, because it still spells success on whatever way you do it. So I think that, I thank you so much for joining us. And I think that one of the things is that people love the idea of investing in real estate, but they don't know where to start. So and that's like anything, but where would they start? What are some of the suggestions that
where do they start? No, I love the question because I get that question a lot. So let me add in two more pieces of information because I think we're almost all girls here. So for me, real estate investing is about being able to be a mom, just to be very straight up. I worked when I had a job, I worked as a receptionist. I worked in childcare, both inside the classroom and as a receptionist. I have a master's in psychology from the University of Santa Monica. Andre might know them. And so it's an integrative master's, Western and Eastern thought. And so really it was about, and the purpose of my real estate is about being able to find the time and the control to be the mom I wanted to be. That's the purpose of my investing. My purpose of being a real estate investor is so I have control, peace, and the desire to apply my time, which is the most valuable asset I have, to the things that I care about and I'm passionate about and are on purpose for me in my life and in my being. So real estate investing serves a purpose that is very personal for me. It is not, it is, I love investing. Do not be confused. If when we go to a party, my husband always teases me because if I hear somebody talking real estate, I'll be like, I'll be right back. He's like, no, you won't. Talk real estate, Christina, because you'll talk real estate the rest of the night. And so I will talk real estate ongoingly, but I will also talk children, and I also talk parenting, and I'll also talk being on purpose and having a spiritual path. And I'll also talk having a sense of joy and peace and balance in one's life and using real estate to fulfill that transformation, abundance, and freedom for myself and others. So I just wanted to lay that layer out as well, that there's that background in my thinking, because it is a bit of a bias for me. And so let's just own it and claim it. So where do you start? So therefore, that ties into the where you start part. So where you start, I'm a believer that real estate performs really well for you if you're in your niche. So it's really about you. It starts with you and it ends with you, right? So where do you start? Some people, so they're, I want to stay away from the best place to invest in real estate is, St. Louis, or the best place to invest in real estate is Texas on the Gulf. There are so many good places to invest in real estate, having invested literally from Kauai all the way to Virginia, in variety, not every state, but in a variety of states in between. There are a lot of places you can invest. If you're looking for a rental property, there are at least 250, if not 350 or 2,000 different sub neighborhoods you can invest in almost any city. Almost. You got to get far enough away from the city to make sure it's rental positive. If you want to be a flipper, there are, 200 MSIAs or MSAs, right? Metropolitan areas where you can invest, where you're right in the city center and right in the density of it. And you don't want to rent. You don't want to purchase for rental. You want to purchase for appreciation. And you want to be able to flip the property because that's where appreciation is going to support you. The appreciation depreciation cycle will support you. So it really, there's like too many places to start to approach it from that point of view. It also doesn't fit what I believe is most important. Using your talents and your sense of purpose for being able to be an investor. So where do you start? So therefore, the answer to that question for me is yourself. What are your talents combined with what is presented to you? And I literally mean go to 6 months of meetings, get a sense for the real estate field. I call it the map of real estate. There's a whole bunch of assets in real estate, but then there's a whole bunch of ways to interact with those assets, right? If I'm a doctor full-time, I do not want to be a flipper. That's not going to help me interact with a single family residence well. I'm not going to do well. Even if I love construction, even if I love interior design, I'm not going to do well. I don't have the time. But I can lend money to a flipper. I can still participate in the asset, but from a different process. So being able to understand your asset, 6 months of taking whatever, low-level classes, going to meetings like this, talking to people, listening to people, educating yourself, developing your network, because your network is your greatest success point. Develop your network, gives you the access to the asset and the process that serves you. Right? So don't be a flipper if you've got a full-time job, be a hard money lender, if that's the asset you want to engage in. But if you don't, and you want to really engage directly with an asset, then great. Consider being a direct owner on a rental property, or consider doing flipping if it's inside of your talent, right? So who was it? Was it Michelle who is a consultant who works on processes? I'm like, oh, baby, like you're perfect. Right? Being able to work on processes is a lot of what owning real estate value add is, whether it's a single family, a multi-unit, or a storage unit. Being able to master the process that controls the asset, the management company, what they're doing, why they're doing it, when are property taxes due, when is the construction crew going to show up, how does this need to happen, how do I control my payments from my rehab loan in relationship to my construction schedule. So I get money back when I need it for the next stage. All of that is very process oriented. So if you're already bring that skill set, then assume you want to be involved in a very process oriented piece of real estate. Oh, and it might be a single family, it might be a multi-unit, it might be a storage unit. So really the place to start is with getting exposure over 6 months to the map of real estate. And where are you going to best be able to apply your natural talents or pleasure or joy?
That's really, really helpful because it's so, like you mentioned, there's so many different asset classes and so many different directions to go. So they'll go to one investment seminar and hear about this, and they go to another seminar and hear about that. They don't know where it is. So not only be versed in all the different asset classes, but also match it to what you have the tolerance for, what you have the assets for. Do you have money? Do you have time? Do you have credit? You know, what you're bringing to the table, and then also being able to find out and be willing to learn what your tolerance is and what your sweet spot is going to be. So, because people always see all these other people making money in real estate and they wonder how they do it. How do they do it? There's many different ways of making money in real estate. How do you think, from the outside looking in, people actually really different ways they make money in real estate?
There are a lot of ways to make money in real estate, but again, I have to divide it along the lines of passive and active, right? So active is I own the property. Maybe I have a little bit of my own money in it. Maybe I have a lot, but I own the property. Maybe I've got my sister and my husband and my mom, and we're all own the property together, right? And I don't have any money in it at all, right? But I'm active. The thing I bring to the project is that I am the active participant, right? So again, so there's direct ownership on real estate. Right? It could be a single family, it could be a multi-unit, it could be a storage unit, whatever it is that you consider to be the asset where either your team can support you or you know how to participate with it. So there's direct active, there's wholesaling. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, place to start in real estate is wholesaling. Yeah, no, it's really hard. Wholesaling is really hard. Wholesaling is a business process. Wholesaling is a business process that happens to involve real estate. Your inventory happens to be real estate, but your primary value is your network. Being able to take this person who has this piece of real estate and this person who's looking for that piece of real estate and putting them together. So your network is really your business model. Oh, and by the way, you're selling real estate, right? And again, it's almost asset agnostic. It could be multifamily, it could be single family, it could be an apartment building. I mean, I said multifamily. It could be a business office, right? It could be a C-grade strip mall and retail, right? But if you're going to wholesale it, it's your network. So get clear on who needs to be in your network based on your asset class and your location. Wholesaling, a lot of talking to people. You can be a flipper, right? So flippers, again, active side, very process oriented, very money intensive. If you want to be a flipper, make sure you either have a project management background, a construction background, or a design background. You want to bring one of those assets, one of those natures, and then you need to find all the other members on your team, whether you hire them or whether they're joint venturing with you. You need to find all the other members on your team because somebody's got to run the project. Somebody's got to figure out the money, and somebody's got to be able to actually do the design. I try to do my own design. I like wearing white. I wear a lot of white. People think I wear white because I have a sense of design, or at least that's the story I tell myself in my head. I suck at interior design. I mean, I suck at interior design. I thought I was all full of myself. I was going to interior design one of my own projects, right? Make a lot of white because I love my white and blah, blah, blah. And honestly, I'm really clear. I lost about $60,000 worth of possible profit because I designed it. Just saying. So I don't design anything. I pay my designer $20,000 happily. Thank you, designer. You just saved me $40,000 of potential loss, right? If not even greater. I've seen, I've had some designers where I'm clear I've gotten an extra 100,000 because of their design work.
Absolutely.
Right? So there's all the active stuff. There's non-performing notes. Also very active, very process-oriented, very people-oriented. Right? You need to have a good boundaried system if you're going to do non-performing notes, because non-performing notes is about calling people and saying, hey, I want to help you, help yourself. But in order for us to do that, we need to talk about something that might be tough for you. You're not paying on this note. right? How do I help you help yourself? Non-performing notes. Performing notes or discounted notes, again, is just a process of shopping and being in the note world. There's a note convention every year. Oh man, I really need to memorize this name. But there's a note convention every year, which is a notes is sort of a subfield inside of the field of real estate by itself, like commercial, like strip malls and office are subfields. So you can do discounted notes if you don't want to do non-performing. They're already performing, but you buy them as a discount because the seller is in distress and they're willing to discount the price of the note. Tax liens, right? You can do that. Low entry point by cost, but a lot of work for following up behind it. It's like non-performing notes. There's a lot of work because the reason why there's a tax lien is because they haven't paid. So again, it's getting somebody who's not performing to perform, but the entry cost is low because you can get them for $500, $1,000, $3,000, $5,000, right? And you can use your friend's money to do it. So that's a lot of the active stuff. There's also a real estate agent, but I don't suggest a real estate agent, actually, believe it or not. I don't suggest a real estate agent because real estate agents aren't really trained to be investors. They're trained to help people to shop for a real estate asset for their primary residence. So unless you're going to be a real estate agent that works with investors, and those are very distinct, then I don't suggest it. I'm just biased that way, unless you want to use being a real estate agent as access to properties. So that's a lot of the active stuff. Passive is notes. Whether I do seller financing, buy a piece of land. I sold that piece of land to my neighbor. Land was not selling. It was in Hawaii. Land was not selling at the time. And I'm like, oh man, I really need to sell this piece of land. I want to sell it this year because Hawaii is by years for those. So for May, who's in Hawaii goes up and down based upon tourism and based upon code. So I owned a piece of land on the north side of the island in Kauai, and you had to build 15 feet in the air. And I didn't want to build 15 feet in the air because it was really hard to get construction costs. Like literally, there was the bridge at the end of the road wouldn't allow more than a 10-ton truck to go across it. How am I going to build 15 feet in the air when I can't? like literally, I would have to order supplies, have the 18-wheeler pull over on the side of the road, put it all in the 10-ton truck, drive it, come back, fill it some more, drive it, come back. That's how they did it at the end of the road. Okay, so maybe buying this piece of land wasn't as good an idea as I thought. So now I wanted to sell this piece of land, but nobody wanted to buy it because land wasn't very considered very valuable. It wasn't in high demand at the time. So I literally had my real estate agent call all the pieces of land that touched the land I had. And I said, I'm willing to put seller financing on it. Do you want to buy it today? If I put seller financing on, I swear I got an extra $50,000 on that piece of land because I put seller financing on it. And she paid me every month ongoingly for 4.5 years. The note was for 5 years and then she paid off, right? So land is another asset you can invest in, and you can do it relatively passively because it kind of just sits there, like literally it sits there. It doesn't do very much, right? So land is good if you're looking to do land banking and you've got a JOB. Right? So that's an asset that you can do relatively passively. Lots and lots of syndicated deals. I love investing with syndicators, but I love investing with syndicators because I do all my work up front. Right? I do literally probably about 8 to 10 hours worth of work investigating a syndicator before I invest with them. I talk to the 3 references. I talk to the syndicator. I read the PPM and the LLC. I actually research that they actually own the properties that they say they own. So I actually get their history and I get on the assessor's website of whatever county, and I confirm that the name on that piece of land that they say they own is titled to their company. I do a background check. I actually look at previous company names that they've had on their background check, right? Oh, gee, Blackstone number 1, 2, and 3. Is there any bad reports out on Blackstone number 1, 2, and 3 now that I'm looking at investing in Blackstone 4? So I spent a lot of time confirming that these people are real and have the depth of experience that they say they're going to have. I'll give you an example. I did a background check for a client of mine. So I'm also, by the way, I'm also a real estate investment advisor. So not only do I do stuff for myself, but I also do stuff for my clients. So this was for a client of mine. And this client wanted and was just, oh my gosh, if I do a joint venture with them, they're going to give me 20%. And I went, oh, 20% is a red flag for me. Let's make sure we look at this. Right? Right.
Right.
So we did a background check on them, and there were three partners. Two of them had a nice depth of experience. I could see 20 plus years worth of owning real estate, being involved in some version of funds. I could confirm the names on some of those businesses they don't. And one guy, though, who was in his 40s, only had 5 years of history. No driver's license before 5 years ago, no businesses, no property before 5 years ago. And I went, that's a red flag for me. I encouraged my client not to invest in that particular syndication. And I'm super glad that she didn't, because 6 months later, there was an article in the LA Times about how they were being investigated by the SEC for fraud. And I went, yeah, there you go. Right.
Wow.
The lack of experience is what was the giveaway. It wasn't the great credit score. It wasn't the talk that they gave. It wasn't their webinar. It was the hole in their experience. So syndicated deals are great because they're wonderful ways to diversify your portfolio. I don't know anything about owning a mobile home park. I don't actually want to know a lot about owning a mobile home park, truth be told. That is not the asset class I'm an expert in, even though it is a version of residential. One could say, why would I not own a mobile home park? I agree, but it's the primary asset class that I actually don't want to be an expert in, and I didn't want to learn to be an expert in. So I've actually lent people money to invest in mobile home parks. Syndications allow you to invest in things that you're not an expert in. Storage units, I'm not an expert in that. Not going to learn to be an expert in that, but a syndicated deal allows me to get access to it. Cannabis allows me to get access to it, right? So these are things that industrial property. I'm invested in it as a joint venture, not as a syndicator, but as a joint venture in an industrial property in LA. Love it. I know the people I am joint venturing with. I know what they're doing. I know all of them either personally, or I vetted all of them with the background check intact, right? So I love syndications, which are passive, but allow you to invest in things you're not experts in, but you need to do your homework. Always, always, always need to do your homework. And notes are a lovely way of being passive as well. My dog is having a bad dream. I apologize. And so there are lots and lots of ways to invest. I think I've just mentioned way too many, and there are even more than what I've mentioned so far.
Well, the thing is, it gives people a lot of food for thought. And that's what's amazing that you just shared. There are all these different asset classes, so they don't have to get stuck with one. And like you mentioned, between the multi-residential, the industrial, the manufacturing, from syndication. So what I think a person needs to do is decide what they bring to the table. Do they have the time? Do they have the credit? Or do they have the money? Or do they have a skill set? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And
yeah,
then
I have a whole chart. Chart together. It's called time and effort, right? And risk tolerance, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, how much time do I have? If I only have a little bit of time, these are the things I should think about. But if I have risk tolerance, then I should pick this set based on my risk tolerance versus this set. But if I have a lot of time, then maybe I should do these. It's a whole matrix based on exactly what you're talking about. Time, effort, what do you bring, right? Those are the elements that you need to understand, and money you're starting with.
Because that would enable them to decide what would be a good investment for them to start with. And again, remembering where they start doesn't mean where they have to finish. They can start in different places and say, okay, this is for me, it's not for me, it keeps me up at night, or this is something I really get into, and then move on to the next asset class.
Yes.
And I agree with you as far as, being a real estate agent, many times feel that's an advantage, only if you feel that you have access to different properties that are not on the market. But now there's so many other different options to be able to find properties that are an option. You may or may not need to do that. You don't need to be a real estate agent to find the best deals, in other words, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, I find that because I want to apply my time to the investment, I don't really want to apply my time to being a real estate agent, right? Yeah. And I also want to apply my time to being a mom. So because I want to apply my time to being a mom, I have 20 hours a week to deal with my investments while my daughter's in school and to be a consultant, right? So being a consultant complements being an investor. My clients are busy out there looking for property, apartment buildings, syndicated deals, in-state, out-of-state. So I'm actually doing a lot of vetting, but I'm being paid to do it as a consultant, which complements my investing. So when somebody says, well, where do you want to invest? I'm like, well, gee, I recently, probably about 3 years ago, I picked an out of state. I wanted to invest out of state again in residential. I started in Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Indianapolis. Why did I pick those 4? Because I knew somebody in all 4 of those cities. I knew either a client had invested in those cities and I had already vetted them, or I already knew a team on the ground because, again, it was through a client or through something I was doing of my own. I had a business partner of mine. I ended up in Indianapolis, but I researched all 4 cities because I had access to all 4 cities. Why did I do that? Because any one of them, I was looking for short-term rentals, cash flow positive. I wanted to buy a single family or duplex that would be cash flow positive, would be a property I would buy that would work as a long-term rental, but then I wanted to short-term rental it in order to increase my returns. Very specific box. I wanted to invest anywhere, wanted to buy between 150,000 to 300,000. That was my box. Any one of those 4 cities would give me that box. Any one of those 4 cities had a crew on the ground that I could work with. My network was what was going to make me successful, right? And then I started working my network, and the Indianapolis was the one that actually created me owning properties there.
So I think you just described it as like so valuable because they need it. It's a thought process that needs to go into all of this. It's not just like, hey, I want to invest in real estate, but you actually just demonstrated how you created a box, how you checked off the items in the box, and how you narrowed it down to what you felt the best formula was going to be.
Yeah. And I even got somebody to do a little data hunting for me to confirm what part of Indianapolis was going to give me the lowest level of investment with the highest level of return based on short-term rentals. I was lucky. I met somebody at a convention and they were like, hey, I'm a data analyst for public works in the city. And I'm like, you know how to coach data much better than even I do. Let's talk. She's like, and you've been in real estate for so long. I'd love to, help you on a project. So I'm like, I know just the project you can help me on. She flew out with me to Indianapolis a couple of times, and I showed her what I was doing, and I introduced her to my contractors, and I let her sort of shadow me as a form of her learning. And that was her payment for doing the data analysis for me. Was I paid for her flight, and she got to shadow me for a while as I purchased my investments, and she got to see what it meant to go from data analysis all the way to purchase to having a successful property that's up and running.
And that brings a great point, Christina, is that, wanting to be involved in real estate and wanting to invest in real estate is great. But I think that always what I suggest is that being able to partner with or mirror a person who's been there and done that. Because no matter how many classes, how many seminars, how many schools you go to, there's just the real experience that comes with a person that's been doing it. And that's the way you learn by and through their experiences. And it's not the first time and second time, may not even be about the money. It's just about the experience. So that will save you thousands of dollars and hours of stress going forward, because it's just so many unpredictables in real estate because you're dealing with so many different things.
Can I hijack for a minute?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I say this at my meeting. I have 2 meetings a month here in Pasadena, FIBI, right? For investors by investors. We meet twice a month here in Pasadena. And I say every single time, and I make sure I say this every single time, the thing that's going to make you most successful in real estate isn't the money you start with. I know I've lost money. I've gained money. It is not the money you start with. What makes you most successful in real estate is your network and your education. The 2 things you need to have underneath you are your network and your education. Every time I've lost money, it's been because of my network. It's been something went wrong in my network, in my business, with my business partners. When I make money, when I lose money, it's very rarely in the asset itself that there was a problem. There was one time I can think of distinctly, no, 2 times, where it was in the asset itself that was the problem. One was a syndicated deal I invested in. You could say it was the syndicator because he was lacking experience in that area and he didn't see it coming. So maybe it was him, but it was the asset itself was now going to cost $250,000 more to repair than he anticipated. That's a big number. Right. And another one was just, I underestimated that the walls weren't really walls in this house I bought. So we had to actually rebuild the walls before we could actually finish rehabbing it, because there was like outside wall, little thin board, inside wall. There was no 2x4 in the middle. Kind of weird. I'm just saying, usually you find a 2x4 in a wall. We didn't find any, or we're not very many. Let's put it that way. So yes, so May, you're absolutely correct. Your network determines your net worth. And I like to add one word in there. The way you treat your network determines your net worth. So being able to grow your network is hugely important. And that's why the 6 months of meetings where you can collect cards from people or chat with them privately in the chat box and go, oh, hey, what are you thinking about? You're a good project manager. Where are you thinking about investing? Do you want a JV? What are your thoughts? I have credit or I have money. You have project management experience. We complement each other. Let's talk about possibly doing something. Some of those conversations will work out. Lots of them will not work out. But if you don't have the conversation, the answer is nothing. So that's your network. Education. 6 months of going to at least one meeting a week to be able to develop your education and your network, and some low-level educational classes. Nothing that costs more than $1,000. You are banned for the first 6 months of your education, your real estate education, of buying anything that costs more than $1,000. Because if you go to the larger ones, I'm not going to call any names like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or anything like Fortune Builders. I'm not going to pull any names out there. Right? If you go to some of the larger ones, the price point is so expensive, and it's like being hooked up to a fire hose. If you don't have basic learning theory, says you need to have something to hang the information on. Associative learning is how most people learn. Being exposed to something 7 times is the easiest way for somebody to learn. If you're taking one class and you have no background in that particular area, you're missing almost 80% of the content, right? So save them. Save them for later. Save them for when you have a basic understanding. Save them for when you've gone to, 6 months worth of meetings. Save them when you've met with people who are flippers for lunch a couple of times. Save them until you get the basic lingo and the concept down of what the process is. Then if you really want to invest $20,000 in a course or a series of courses, help yourself, but just don't do it in the beginning. It's not going to give you the return that you're looking for. Just a suggestion.
Well, it's excellent advice, because otherwise you'll just end up with a lot of tapes and books and no actual knowledge. And again, like mirroring someone like you or having that investment advisor or just being part of a community is going to be much more valuable, because basic things like, okay, they find a property or find an opportunity. Is this a lemon or is this a gem? Like that's like really.
Did you steal my words, honey? Did you remember that? That's the title of one of my speeches. Is this a lemon or a gem?
In this content from your words, absolutely guilty as charged. But that's huge, because that's the first thing that they don't know. You don't know what you don't know, and so they need to learn those things. So talk about that. Learn how to do the due diligence.
Do the due diligence, yes. So is this a lemon or a gem? So lemon or a gem is actually the title for that particular. I actually have okay. So I do have a series of speaker topics because I do get invited to speak sometimes. You're absolutely correct. So you must have seen that on my media page. I think that's lovely of you to remember. The lemon and a gem topic, actually part of that is we're focusing on, once you've bought a multi-unit or bought a rental property, how can you turn this around, right? So is it a lemon or a gem? Do I want to keep it? Do I want to get rid of it? And there are properties that are just stinky and you don't want them and you can't turn them around. But that particular lecturette has a whole series of identifying 4 areas where your property can reside. How do you know that one of those areas is the one where it's occurring? I actually teach you how to assess it based upon cash flow and communication with property management and stuff like that. And then what is the solution for turning around if it's one of these 4 areas? So that is accurate. But at the same time, I have a whole process of due diligence. So I'm a great believer of due diligence. So I do teach my course, which I'm mastermind course, which I only teach about once every 6 months, has in it, and the first, the biggest single chunk of it is due diligence. This biggest single piece is, how do I do due diligence on a brand new city? I've never invested before, right? Because I picked 4 cities, right? Of those 4 cities, I need to be able to understand what was in those cities. What were my neighborhoods going to be? And then once I identified my neighborhood, what house did I actually want to purchase, right? I call it a funnel. Like Lily, yes, okay, does that look like a funnel? There we go. I call it the funnel, right? Where you're actually going from basically statewide knowledge to city, to regional, to city, right? To neighborhood, to purchase, right? You want to make sure that you're going to do a long-term rental. You want to make sure you're in a city that has multiple industries that are supporting it. Las Vegas is a really good example. Las Vegas and I think Florida both lost almost 80%. Parts of Las Vegas dropped 85% in the 2009, 2010 period. And they lost 85% because Las Vegas primarily is focused on tourism. And so in that downturn, when they were in a great recession, right? We didn't quite hit depression. Recession is 2 quarters of negative GDP. Depression is 3 quarters of negative GDP. We can have a whole conversation on what that means as far as do we believe the reporting of GDP or not, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the point is we had a recession, which was only 2 quarters of negative GDP, even though it looked like it wanted to be a depression, which meant that the asset prices were actually permanently repositioned lower, which is what occurs in a depression versus what occurs in a depression, which is more temporary, right? Or tangential, wrong word, moving on. So, but the point is that there can be cities where you can lose a lot of value because there isn't a diversified neighborhood or a stable, long-standing neighborhood. So you want to invest in diversified cities as far as industry. How do you find that out? City-data.com. Cheap, free, love it. Data rich, love it. They have a heat map on city-data.com that shows you by the sensory squares, right? Because it's based on the census, where this particular city has this particular, like Lily, like 8 block by 8 block. Sometimes it's 16 by 24 block. What is the unemployment rate? What is the primary racial mix in that area? What is the price to rent ratio in that area? What is the median income in that area? What is the crime in that area? City-data.com, guys, and it's free. Okay.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Well, people pay John Burns's company like $20,000. I know because I have a client who pays $20,000 for a series of reports on a city that they're looking to invest in. And I'm like, I understand he's doing development. It's a much deeper process than me trying to buy a rental unit. But city-data.com works because even though the data is almost 10 years old, cities don't move quickly. And because it is census data, it's usually updated every 5 years with sort of like it's an update. It's not a full depth of research. So if you're looking to invest, you want to go to city-data.com. That's one of the steps. Then you can start picking out, well, what part of the city do I want to be in? If it's not diversified, an undiversified industry, I don't want to be here at all, even if I know somebody on the ground. If it is diversified industry and they have strong employment, then I want to start finding my neighborhood. Where's my neighborhood? My neighborhood is based upon what I'm looking to invest with. If I want to do flips, I want to be more city center and I'm looking for more appreciation. The chart that does this and this. If I am looking for a long-term rental, I'm looking for a neighborhood, a suburb of a large city that has strong industrial mix. And I'm looking for a chart that does this, right? Yeah. So that just to give you 2 examples, right? Obviously there's a lot more than just, single family residentials or flipping, but just to give you 2 examples of the due diligence you can do. Thank you, May. I appreciate it. So that's just a place to start to do your due diligence. Then you pick your neighborhood, then you go to Zillow. And you go, okay, Zillow, do I actually want to buy any of these things, right? What do they look like? What do I want to do with them, right? If I want to rent them, I need to be able to purchase them I want my rent to be 1% of my purchase price. So if I'm going to buy it for $100,000, I want it to rent for $1,000. Zillow will let you know that, right? You can also go to RadPad and a variety of other rental sites. Also, Rent-O-Meter is a really good site. Rent-O-Meter.com is another really good site for figuring out what your rentals are if you don't want to use Zillow. Rent-O-Meter will also give you a map of all the things that are out there being rented. So you want to be able to purchase it for 1%, just a rule of thumb. If you're looking to do rehab, you want to be able to either add square footage. If you're in the compressed part of the market and it's harder to buy that flip at a 70% of ARV, right? So if you're in the beginning market, you want to buy it at 70% of its after repair value minus construction, rule of thumb. If you're in the compressed part of the market where it doesn't look like you can get a 30% discount on something, forget even construction costs, then you want to be able to add square footage. But you really want to understand your permitting if you're going to add square footage, like really understand your permitting if you're going to add square footage. So your contractor becomes even more important because he or she is going to be running your permitting process for you. So just you asked me about my due diligence and how I run through this funnel. This is how I run through the funnel if I'm looking to do direct ownership. If I'm looking to do a syndication, that's a whole nother list.
Well, I think the bottom line is doing your due diligence, and that's where you start, because there's a lot of other questions that come up. It's like not every deal's right for you, managing the managers, choosing your team, whether to keep it or to cut bait. And what I want to take a moment to remind everyone is that you have courses, classes, and programs that work with them. So tell us about that. Just tell before we open up to questions, and because I know there must be a million questions out there. What do you offer for those who just really want that one-on-one or smaller, or that want to expedite the process?
So I do the one-on-one mentorship program that's specifically for people who are like ready to invest today. Like, gee, I just sold a house and now I've got some cash and I want to go out of state with it, but I don't know what I'm doing. Or I already have a portfolio and the truth is it's not making me more peaceful and I don't feel more abundant. It's basically a pain in the patootie and I need it to work better. I've worked with many people. I can give you lots of examples of people who are like, one of my favorite, I had two sisters who inherited their dad's portfolio with 20 apartment buildings in and around LA. Oh, not a bad inheritance, but they hated it. They hated it. They're like, my dad used to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to take the phone calls for busted toilets. We don't want to do that. And I'm like, okay, let's start repositioning some assets here. Right. So that's one-on-one work, specifically sort of shadowing people in their investing process, all the way from the investor profile. Where do you want to, what's the right first investment for you is the investor profile, right? And that way it's defined on your time and your effort and your capital you're starting with, and what you bring to the table, your nature, what's going to let you sleep well at night. So the investor profile to the strategic plan, to implementing the strategic plan, including me doing team interviews and being able to help you do syndication reviews and doing the due diligence and the background check. So I kind of hold your hand through the whole thing until you feel like you're ready to start like running. I give you the tools in the process that I use so that you can hopefully be educated on being a professional investor of your own. That's the mentorship program. So I'm really helping you actually place assets. The mastermind program is much more about just teaching you the tools, the skill set. If you're a newer investor, you're curious about, well, how do I buy a single family? I've never even done that. I don't know anything about it. Just, I'm one of those courses that's less than $1,000, right? So it's meant to be a specific, right? I want to be one of your intro courses where I do go through the investor profile and helping you identify who that might be. I teach you how to vet a city. I teach you how to do your due diligence on actually being able to purchase a house, whether it's for flipping or whether it's for renting long-term or short-term rental. And then I go in the advanced course, I specifically continue on how do you vet a syndicator, right? How do you buy a multi-unit? Right? So those are courses that are modules that are in the advanced course, but I only teach that once every 6 months.
Do you have one coming up?
I might start one in January, but there's a really good chance I won't start till April, truth be told.
Okay, but anyone that's interested, they should just either put their information in the text or go to your website and become, well, they get a free download. They get a free, and I opted for that download, which is really a lot of valuable information. They get a download, they go to your website, and then they can be automatically on your list. And I encourage everyone to go, it's ChristinaSuter.com, and be able to explore around there. But also I want to make a distinction, because some people feel, okay, well, I can get a realtor. I just go to a realtor.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not a realtor's job. That's not a realtor's job. A realtor's job, specifically, I was a realtor since 1989 and a broker, so I know what that job is to sell your property. That's how they're compensated, through the commission. Okay, so if they don't sell your property, they're not compensated. So I'm going to give you the information that's necessary and relative to selling you a property. You're going to go to them and say, I'm looking for this, but you don't have any background due diligence or knowledge as to whether that is a good deal for you. So that's the distinction. So don't think you're going to get your knowledge, your education, or your guidance from a realtor. They're very valuable and very helpful. But if you're really serious about investing in real estate, you need an investment advisor, someone to advise you and teach you and walk with you. Through the peer. Because yesterday someone called me and she just sold her house in Colorado and she had $200,000 and she wanted to do something. And meanwhile, she has having another one built in Vegas until June. Well, I advised her to come and attend and talk with you for that, because there's different things you can do during that time. And if she goes to a realtor, they're going to just sell her something, but may not be able to sell in 6 months. I think you may not be able to sell it in time. You may take a loss. You don't know what the market's going. So, I really think that real estate, I call it a big girls game, because you're paying, no, it is a big girls
No,
game.
no, I have noticed it's a big girls game. Having started at 17 and now being 53 and having walked this path for a lot of years while I was, in the early part holding, doing a job and developing my portfolio and then eventually retired full time and blah, blah. It's a big girls game. Nobody told me at 17 it was a big girls game. Somebody should have told me.
And so you got to play big. It's a lot of win and a lot of loses. And you just don't want to play with that. You don't want to take the chances and forget about the money, because money can be replaced. But I've unfortunately seen so many women that have done something to one, two, three deals that were not done correctly. No fault of their own, but the fault of the due diligence or the lack thereof. And now they're turned off from real estate. So they're turned off with something that could have enabled them to live that rich life that you described, because they've had that bad experience. It's only because they didn't partner with the right people and the right things. Has nothing to do with real estate. Has everything to do with what they did.
Yeah, and it's difficult because that's where vetting the team. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a very cliched term. Vet your team. We all say that, but I've had team members that I've lost. I've lost a lot of money because of team members, right? I remember I paid one team member $60,000 to run one of my projects, and the project never came to completion. I had another team member where I gave a down payment, gave them as in like a note, a down payment on their primary residence. It was supposed to be a flip, and they never flipped it. And then when they sold it, because they were living on the money on the rehab loan, when they sold it, I didn't get my down payment back. She wasn't able to pay me, so it's like, so yes, it's vetting your team, but it is the big girl part. Like, who is my team, and how do I really understand who these people are, and how do I create a successful relationship with them, and how do I stay in my lane but make sure they're doing theirs? And it really is a growth process. And you're right, real estate agents are trained to be real estate agents. They're trained to sell houses. There are only a few real estate agents who are generally investors themselves, who understand at least the 1% rule. Right. When you say, I remember, being a younger investor and being in Hawaii when I was buying in Hawaii, and I bought this guy was leaning against the sofa, and I have this vivid image of me saying, so how much do you think this place would rent for? He's, at least a good $3,500 to $4,000 a month. And I'm like, cool. And I didn't go to the website to confirm it. Right. And I didn't confirm it. He was not a investor, real estate agent that specialized in investors. He didn't really know what it was. It was after I purchased the property that I went, oh yeah, what is it going to rent for? And it
and that's an experience. That's right? Even experienced investors run into that. So you can imagine. So my thought is that if they're not willing to invest less than $1,000, then they must be prepared to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, to educate, to be educated.
You want to be educated. You want to figure out where you want to start, and then start educating yourself there. And maybe that's not where you end up, right? We talked earlier about where you want to start and how to figure out where you want to start. I spend 6 months getting yourself a general education very cheaply by paying nothing or $20 to go to a meeting and getting exposure, figuring out what excites you. Pick one. Get yourself educated in that one at a low level. Find YouTube, series of courses, books on that level. Get yourself educated in that slot. Then approach actually investing in that slot. Maybe you don't end up there. Maybe you get your ass handed to you and you're like, yeah, no, I'm done with this. Right?
Next.
And you're going next, and you're going somewhere else. But honor the process, that it is about education and network. And what you want to develop is your education and your network before you start actually investing money. So there are some questions in the chat. Should I jump to those?
Yes, please do. Thank you.
Okay, so share about Phoebe. So For Investors by Investors is it's like a RIA, in that it's a real estate investment association, I think is what RIA stands for, but it's an independent. And it is, I run 2 meetings here in Pasadena. We do not have a meeting in Hawaii. I think we have a meeting in Arizona. I think we're opening a new meeting on the East Coast, but mostly our meetings are here in Southern California. What I like about the For Investor by Investor Network is that it is no sales. It's about networking and education. That's what they focus on, is networking and education. Interesting, right? The two things I value in my investing the most is what the meetings offer. But there are other meetings that will be focused primarily on networking and education, and not focusing on selling you a particular course or a particular book. So that's the For Investors by Investors. You can find them on meetup.com. Like a lot of meetings, if you're looking for real estate meetings in a new area, you're a new investor and you're looking for a real estate meeting, bye, Andrea. Then you go to meetup.com, because there are lots, and type in real estate. You will find lots of real estate meetings in your area. You want to find a meeting that has at least 500 members or more and focuses on education and networking and in their description of the meeting, and be willing to just try them out. If you walk in there and you're like, ooh, this is a stinky meeting, or all they're doing is selling me stuff, then just don't go back. So pick at least 4 meetings a month that become sort of your regular routine of meetings. That's where you're going to develop your network and your friendship and people who will trust you and you trust them. Note investing. Juliet, I am not a big note investor in that I don't teach note investing. So I don't have that in my coursework. I do seller financing, and I do direct loans to flippers. And so therefore, obviously, I do create notes, and I do have notes. I often will get notes if I want to do something that's outside of my direct area. I will use a broker. I will specifically go to a hard money lender or somebody who brokers notes, and I will purchase through them. So I don't teach notes. I think that was our 2 questions.
Yeah.
You're welcome,
So
Juliet.
anyone else want to open up? Thank you so much.